The XY Advisor podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. This content is created in partnership with our sponsor, Australian Retirement Trust, ABN 60905 115 063, AFSL number 228975, and is limited to publicly available information. General advice may be provided by our sponsor, but does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Before acting on any general advice, you should consider whether appropriate and obtain financial advice from a qualified financial advisor. XY Advisor does not hold an AFS license and does not provide any financial advice or services or endorse any general advice. If a PDS or IM exists, you should obtain a copy and review it thoroughly before making a decision.
Welcome to the XY Advisor podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app.
This series is brought to you by Australian Retirement Trust, a fund that's trusted by over 4,000 advisors and more than 2 million members. With over $200 billion in retirement savings, they have the size and scale to seek out world-class investment opportunities that others may miss, and are committed to working with advisors to help your clients live the retirement they want. Visit australianretirementtrust.com.au/advisor. Includes super savings and QSuper FUM and members at June 2022.
Hello and welcome back to this series on the art of building trusted relationships. Now, as trust is an unconscious feeling which is felt by somebody, and building trust is complicated, looking at the research in this episode, number 2 of a 4-part series, we hear from our panel of speakers about the second area of trust, authenticity. Let's jump straight in. Andrew, thank you for joining me in the second episode of our series. We are highlighting the ideas around authenticity and how that brings to the trusted relationship of financial advisors. Let's kick off with the concept of authenticity. What is it and where did it come from?
So authenticity is really a reaction to a bunch of work which was done and started in 1992 by the Bain Consulting Group, which looked at the concept of likability in relationships. And so they were focusing on building likability scores for their businesses so that people could understand them and articulate them. And that came out as the Net Promoter Score, so the NPS score, and which is a likability score. So likability is interesting, but it's not important. So likability tends to answer a question in a couple of ways. Would you recommend and how much do you like the service are the two questions. And the reaction to that came out really relatively swiftly from I think it started in the medical industry where it said, well, that's interesting, but it's not important. What's important in this is authenticity, which is a subset of predictability, which is one of the big trust drivers. So if you think about trust being driven by benevolence, competence, integrity, and predictability, authenticity fits into that predictability bucket. And if you want to read about that, there's a guy from the University of Michigan who's done some really, really good work on that. And Philip Symbio is another writer who's done a lot of really good work on that. So understanding that becomes really important. So authenticity is 2 questions. It's, are people what they say they are? And do they do what they say they're going to do? So it's a really, really simple set of questions to ask, and researchers tend to like it because it gives you a 2x2. You can you can track people on the x-axis on are they who they say they are, and the y-axis on who they say are they going to be. Do they do what they say they're going to do? So that gives you a couple of quadrants. And interestingly, we've had some changes in core data in the last little while, and I've been pushing the changes through as quickly as I've had. One of the things that you always do is reflect on yourself and am I doing everything that I said I was going to do? And the answer to that was often no. And it was never a question of intention. It was a problem of bandwidth. So one of the things that I've started to do, particularly with clients and also with staff, is just promise less. So we'll get to that when we can. And I think you just walked in on a meeting, as we were starting, Fraser, and people were saying, we want to do this, this, and this, and this. And I was like, not in the next 270 days, we're not, because we won't be able to deliver it. And that will lower the authenticity we have as a management team. So in the advice relationships, this becomes really important, and it really becomes really important to another part of psychology, which is the concept of anchoring. We're kind of poor at this as an industry, and anchoring is when you come back to something that you've done with people and remind them of what's going on. So Now what happens in Core Data and with our clients is we work on a 90-day cycle with people, and we're very clear about it. And we say, this 90 days, we're going to do this, and we're going to focus on doing, it's always generally about 3 things, because there's a very strong rule of 3 in people and the way in which people remember things. So I'm going through the process now, coming back to the team and my clients and said, hey, remember in this quarter we said we were going to do A, B, and C? Well, we've done A, B, and C. We've also, in some cases, done E, F, and G as well. And if you work here internally and you've done E, F, and G as well, you tend to get a bonus. And if you've done A, B, and C well, then, then you get your salary. And if you haven't done A, B, and C, then that's another challenge. And we're having the same conversation with the clients and making sure that we've delivered against the things that we say that we're going to deliver against. That anchoring has a really powerful and positive impact, particularly if you back it up with data. If you're saying to your clients, we're going to meet in 90 days, in that 90 days, we're going to have done these 3 jobs, and you come back and say, remember how we said we're going to do these jobs, we delivered against these jobs in this time frame, and then we have actually do it and we can anchor it. So an example at Core Data might be is that we changed from the Google Suite to the Microsoft Suite. We said that was going to take a quarter, and we were going to move from Confluence to SharePoint as a way of doing it. And we delivered against all those things. And so, we were able to say, we said we're going to deliver this on the operational side. We said we're going to hit these numbers on the sales side. We're going to do this on the satisfaction side. 6 months ago, we said we were going to organize an offsite in Manila. We're now delivering on the offsite in Manila and making sure that we're doing all those things. So this authenticity piece becomes really important. So it's 2 integers, and you should put this in your business all the time. If we ask the question to our clients, are we who we say we are? Do the clients, up for a start, know who we say we are? That's a really interesting question, because often they don't know who you say you are. Can they answer the question if you say, company A, who are we? And they can replay back who you say you are to them. And B, do we deliver on what we're going to deliver on? Say we're going to deliver on and have that as an integer. That becomes really powerful. It's in our client feedback surveys now, and sometimes that's really brutal.
Yep.
But it's a good learning every time.
Yep. I'm going to dive into a bit more in the next episode into delivery and reliability in that sense, which was what comes next after delivery. But I want to talk about a lot of look. We're in a profession that there's been a lot of human beings, and sometimes there's people being who they're not, like be who you say you're going to be. And then if somebody is not necessarily a particular way, or they like to do things a certain way, do you think they're better off just to be really who they are rather than try and be someone they're not? As in if they're not used to, we're recording this in Sydney, there's a lot of suits and ties, but if somebody's in the outback in a small country town, they might not be, they're better off to be who they are.
I'm not a trained psychologist, so I'm kind of hesitating to answer this. I've read a lot about this, but I'm by no means an expert and wouldn't represent myself as that. If you're not who you say you are, then it causes a great deal of psychic pain. Yeah. There's the whole concept of psychopathy of people who are really good at misrepresenting themselves. There is as many of those people in this industry, the industry they work in, that there are in any industry. So I don't think we're perversely overrepresented in that space. But there are plenty of observable psychopaths in this industry who aren't who they say they are. And if you've been around long enough, you can recognize them pretty quickly. They are by their nature destructive. And you and I will have seen great businesses wrecked by people who were just making sure that they were wealthy at the end of the process rather than had the interest of the business or the customers in mind. Yep. Those people are fairly frightening because they're prepared to put the pain of other people aside and get wealthy from it, and fully understanding what they're doing is going to be causing pain. I think you need people who know more about psychology than me to answer that honestly, but it is kind of interesting. Yeah,
I was bringing that when I'm talking to people about podcasts, because people are like, oh, we edit all this bit out, do it. And I said, no, we don't. We leave the ums and ahs in because that is who you are. And if somebody's meeting you in a meeting or in real life, and they've heard of you speaking on podcasts, you're going to get the same person that they've seen. So I always talk about the concept of authenticity when people think they're going to edit out all the ums and ahs out of it and polish their performance up to make it very special.
It's so confronting though, Fraser. A few years ago, I was doing some extra education because I thought, work was really not that demanding, and I thought that would be interesting. And so I went and I spent some time at the University of Sydney, and I went through a bunch of personal psychological tests, and I kind of believe in those things. I think they're about 80% right. I was really confronted by the answers about who I was as a person, and coming to terms with the fact that that I have very low tolerance for people. I move on pretty quickly. I've got a fast processor brain, yada yada yada, and all the in some ways the positive parts of yourself, but in a lot of ways that's a negative part of yourself as well, because increasingly running a business is a role of leadership, and increasingly leadership is having a vision but putting your ego aside. And if you're quite a competitive person, you tend to be male, you play a lot of sport and you compete at a lot of sport, you get confused as to why other people aren't competing or trying or striving or trying to do the best thing for the team. And you just have to learn that you have to really focus on the team first and put the other part about it. And it's painful. And if you're not hardwired to be a great manager, it's absolutely painful, but it's the most important job you can do.
Yeah.
So I'm authentically quite a poor manager.
Fair enough. And I love the idea of putting your ego aside. Thank you so much for chatting to us about this particular topic. We'll catch up with you very shortly when we start talking about reliability.
No problem at all.
Jane, welcome back, and thank you for joining me again. We're here to talk about authenticity.
Hi, Fraser. Thank you for having me.
So, Jane, we've had a few sneak peeks into your authentic self in the last episode. You mentioned some things about your kids and some of the conversations you have with your clients. How important is it for you to present as your true self, as Jane, rather than sort of, as a professional that doesn't show their emotion or talk about their kids or anything like that? How important is it for you in your client relationships?
Look, it's really important. I was really blessed when I had my youngest daughter, who's now 11. I was blessed in a way. Some people might think that it was torture, but I was blessed in a way that I could have an easy transition back into work, and I sort of went back a little earlier than anticipated for a couple of reasons. And so I had this new little baby that was about 3 months old, and had to do a little road trip to see some new clients, and so they got to see the real me with this little baby. Hello, this is Jane. This is who I am. Here's my daughter, Ruby. She's a baby. And at most of those appointments, it was a week-long road trip around regional Australia or regional New South Wales. And I think every one of the clients was holding Ruby at some point while I was writing notes. And I still have some clients who say, "How's our baby going?" And I say, "Well, she's now 11 years old." So they've been able to see the real me, the me as a mum, and juggling me as a planner at the same time. So I think that they have seen warts and all, the real me. And there is a thing about people in regional communities. I live in a smallish community, and there is a real village. There's a real village and community sense, and I get that in all of the places that I go to. So people get to, we've been through droughts and we've been through floods and lots of different events in some of these towns. So I get to see the clients' warts and all when they're in very challenging situations, and I think they can see that I'm responding in my true, authentic way when we're dealing with those situations, because there has certainly been some challenging points where clients have gone through where we've had to, take a drastic turn on our pathway of advice. And, I sort of say to the clients, when I'm guiding them through whatever the most recent hurdle is, if it is a hurdle, that I'm going to remove the emotion from the conversation. I'm going to remove the emotion in what I think is best for them, because often they're trying to make that decision with emotion, and that can be good and bad. So that's where I explain to the clients that they might be having something very difficult that they're dealing with, and that is bringing their emotions to the surface. And whilst I take that on board, sometimes I need to put that aside for them in order to make the advice decision for them in their best interests. And I think explaining that makes them see that I have the capability of deep-seated emotion, but I also have the ability, as someone who's a professional advisor for them, to remove it in order to take the next step forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. A couple of really good things that you mentioned in there. They're just the vulnerability when the clients have a vulnerable moment, and often the reason they need you is because they're vulnerable, and to be able to present themselves as vulnerable, but for you to be able to be authentically you and be yourself, and for them to feel comfortable in that space. But you mentioned the concept of emotional decisions, which is obviously where a lot of the stuff falls down, right? If you just make emotional financial decisions, you probably make more bad ones than good. But if you bring the logical conversation, then you'll probably make more better financial decisions than emotional. So I think it's interesting to be able to lean into that concept of being able to say, when at emotional, vulnerable moments, you're going to bring the logic.
Absolutely, because logic is a really important tool to have. And I think when people are feeling very vulnerable, and we've all been there, we all have these moments of vulnerability. I think that's a very important emotion to capture and to hold on to, and to remember what it's like to feel vulnerable, because I've had instances in my life where I have felt very vulnerable, and I have this sort of saying then, when I don't know what to do, I'll just do nothing, because I don't want to go and make a bad decision. And if where I'm sitting, I'm aware of what's around me and the space that I'm in, then I won't make a move forward, because I don't want to make a move backwards until I have all the facts. So it really is about, explaining to people that it's really important to have as much information as around you as possible, and to act accordingly when you have as much information, because then you can make a well-informed decision. And there's lots of people that come to me that are not in a vulnerable space, that we're just moving forward through life and they've just decided that they want to make a decision. Or I've got existing clients that we're just doing our pathway through. But even then, if we are doing a review and we're really not making any changes, I'm explaining to them, because I've considered every factor, and there's no need to make a change, and that's because we've looked at everything around us, and we've got as much information to make that well-informed decision.
Yep. Fantastic. Jane, thanks for coming and chatting to us about authenticity and sharing a little bit about your journey, your story. And I love the vulnerability piece and the logical versus emotional decisions. Thank you for that. We'll join you. We'll have you back on the next episode when we start talking about reliability.
Thanks, Fraser. Talk soon.
Now, in this particular episode, we are leaning into the concept of authenticity with regards to building trust, or pillar 2 of building trust, authenticity. And we've talked about behaviours in the first episode and setting up a lot of the conversations and clients. But tell us about the concept of authenticity to you. You mentioned that you do like to be real and yourselves and in those meetings. So tell us about how important it is for you.
I guess I probably covered some of those in the first sort of episode, but I guess the main thing for us is explaining to the client a couple of things. One is what our philosophy is and how we operate, to make sure that it is compatible with the types of sort of things they're looking to achieve. I think the fee conversation, we sort of spoke a fair bit about that in the first episode. I think that's quite important as far as that's concerned. Talking about, really just going through the process in some degree with the client is really, really important, so that we can sort of demonstrate to them that this is what their expectations are, this is what we expect from them, this is what they can expect from us, and that, it is a relationship-driven type event, and, so that we need to get on and make sure that, we are compatible as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it, the relationship piece of this. So tell us a little bit more about that, how you have conversations, or you just at the very beginning try and set the scene for, this is who I am, this is how I behave, this is how I talk, this is the way I act, all those sort of things, and also making the clients feel comfortable about them being themselves as well, not having to put on a front.
Yeah, and it could just be, when you've got a target market, for example, that might be, mums and dads or those sorts of things. It may be, not turning up with a suit and 3-piece suit and a tie and, those sorts of things. We still go and visit a lot of clients. That's sort of a point of difference for us. And visiting someone, I got taught a long time ago, there's nothing like visiting someone in their home because you get to see how they live, how they operate. Particularly people who might have children, they appreciate it. For those of us who've had children, we all appreciate the difficulties when they're sort of 2, 3, 4 and 5 sort of thing, trying to feed them and entertain them and those sorts of things. So we'll still, and we do a lot of work in sort of corporates. So we go out to a lot of work offices and those sorts of things as well. But I think importantly is when someone's particularly been referred by someone else, we sometimes have a bit of a conversation about, what have they, what did they say to you that sort of more or less had brought you in here today? So what was it that resonated with you? And it could be, I just want to check on, my super fund, or I want to check on whether we're on track for retirement because I know that you've done this, and this for, this other client. So have it sort of trying to weave in a little bit without saying, hey, do you know the other person's situation? Just trying a bit of background. Again, it also sort of shows that, you are listening to what they want rather than, telling them how much we know, so to speak.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, the concept of authenticity, when I think about this, is what you're saying is it's just building and building and building upon that, that relationship. Tell us a little bit more around those conversations that you have with your client at the initial stages, and I guess with setting expectations. But tell us about that conversation that you have and throughout your process. How long is your process, and how does that work?
Look, to be honest, I try and have the meeting as quick as possible. We surveyed some clients years ago, and the number one issue, or when clients had any complaints at all, was the meetings went too long. I think we have this expectation, whether it be because we're trying to justify our fees or whatever it might be, that we need to have, the first meeting's got to be an hour, or it's got to be this, or it's got to be that. I mean, we often say to the client before you come in, we need you to send us a high-level macro financial picture because we want to spend the time with you talking about the things that are important, not how many BHP shares you've got or what your house is worth, so to speak. Also, too, if people don't do that before they come in, it just gives us a bit of an idea about, their commitment perhaps to the process. And we're getting closer to the point where we probably, not seen as, we won't see someone until they've done that because, we want to make sure that the time we spend with them is of value to them. We'd like to leave them, worst case scenario, I'd like to leave them leaving the office, even if we don't do anything for them, thinking, hey, that was well worth the 30 minutes or 40 minutes. So often find, normally that the conversation in the first meeting, I think you can, unless someone's got a very complex situation, we're more interested in what they want to do and what they want to achieve. And that doesn't really take a lot of time. It's all that data gathering, which can come later, that, tends to take a bit of time. So we try and remove that as much as we can from that initial meeting.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love the fact that you asked your clients to do a survey and they told you, make the meeting shorter. How important is it to you that you get the real Anthony Jones across, who you are, what you believe in, rather than, say, the Templeton's financial, advisor from a logo? How important is it you to get the real you across?
Well, it's sort of difficult because I think we run the same sort of process. We do the same sort of, and I know with my business partner, he operates exactly the same. So whether a client saw myself or him, I think you would get a very similar outcome. And I think, look, as long as we always put the client's interest first, that will automatically, in my view, place you in that sort of authentic position. I guess probably tend not to talk too much about ourselves, but I'm happy to use examples of myself as well to clients to make it a little bit more real. A simple thing could be, if someone's talking about life insurance, I can hand them I take my life insurance schedule of my own with me. So if someone goes, we're talking about this, and why would you need that? And gee, that seems like a lot, or whatever it might be. I'm more than happy to sort of share what I do for myself. It's pretty simple that way.
It's a fairly common question, isn't it? What do you do?
Well, actually, I've never get asked it. I'm surprised that people don't ask more often, what do you do? How do you invest your money? Where's your super fund? Where's this? You never get asked. It's really interesting.
Yeah, they're probably just thinking it and too scared to ask.
Probably, yeah. But I actually offer and say, well, this is what I've got and this is how I've structured and this is the reason for it. So again, rather than saying something like, the reason you have life insurance, maybe life insurance in super is because of X, Y, and Z. I'll say to them, this is the reason I've done it. Or if you're talking about estate planning, this is the reason I've put a testamentary trust in, blah, blah, blah. So when you've sort of done it, all of a sudden someone goes, well, gee, if you've done it for yourself, you're eating your own cooking, I guess is the way to describe that. So
yeah. It's not just do what I say, but it's do what I do. I love it. Anthony, thanks so much for coming on this particular episode. I look forward to catching you in the next episode.
Sure. Look forward to it.
Thank you for joining me again, Anne.
Fraser, I'm back. You've had me back. I'm a lucky girl. I'm a lucky girl. I've been invited back.
You passed the first episode,
yay,
so we'll get you back.
Yay me.
Now, speaking of which, we are talking about authenticity and being real and being honest and open, and it's certainly from both it's probably easy to do as a human being point of view, but I want to talk to you a little bit about from a brand point of view as well, because we're all human beings, but we all also represent brands. And how do we keep it real or remain authentic from both a human being point of view and a brand point of view?
It's a really good question. I think I'm so excited about the new brand. When we're recording this, we showed the big debut of the TV ad with Artie the pig and Big Baby and the Swedish trains. So the culture of both Heritage Sun and Q, obviously we've come out of Queensland, and Queensland is a really relaxed, informal, fun, culturally.
Slightly patriotic state.
Slightly patriotic. I do confess I'm very patriotic as a Queenslander, particularly on those 3 nights of the year that involve a maroon jersey. But so I guess, and there's a lot of fun. And so I feel like the new brand has a lot of, reflects those attributes. It's unpretentious, it's fun, it's accessible. And I'd like to think that is the authenticity of who, everyone I work with here at Australian Retirement Trust. That's kind of what it's like to work here. It's down to earth, accessible, fun. How can we help? That's the vibe of the place.
Yep. And I think it's pretty important for financial advisors running their own practices that they understand what their own authentic self is and then how they translate that into their own brand.
I couldn't agree more. The advisors who I love they are so comfortable in their own skin. They're completely unpretentious. They've got a beautiful down-to-earth bedside manner. If you think about the doctor, like the doctors that if you've been in hospital or had to go to a GP, they don't speak the jargon. They're not sort of all kind of stiff and acting all kind of, professional, like I'm, born to rule, sort of they say, oh, don't call me doctor, call me blah, blah. And the advisors that I think have the highest impact, we've had a couple of advisors over the years sort of talk to all of the staff here at Australian Retirement Trust, and the ones that are really just their unpretentious, normal selves who just tell and they're great storytellers, and they just tell great stories about how they've helped their clients who happen to be members of ART. Man, that people talk about them for ages afterwards about, oh, they were just amazing. I loved that story about how they helped the so-and-so member. I'm like, yeah. So that's what it's all about, really. Those advisors that do tell those stories, they get repeated over and over. It's the best form of advertising you can have.
Yeah, when you tell the story of the doctor, it makes me feel like the power imbalance, right? The idea of, somebody who is on a different level than you. What are your thoughts on that with the advisors, just trying to make sure that they are on the same level as the client?
But I think there are those, if I apply the doctor, you've got those doctors that refuse to work in the public health system because of this, I'm here to make a lot of money, and there is probably that power imbalance where I think like the advisors, again, that I think who inspire me, we all obviously want to make a good living, but they have that sense of service where they do some pro bono and keep it, how can they help and serve the community and also generate a good income for their family and pay their staff good wages, etc. So, there isn't that power. They're not how they show up doesn't ooze power.
Yeah, you mentioned that sense of purpose or sense of community. How important is it to understand their own sense of purpose, their own values and philosophies, and therefore be able to say, this is actually who I am as a human being, and I'm going to lean in and embrace that? They'll probably end up with those types of clients.
Yeah, don't you think, Fraser, that if you walked out onto the street here and you asked anyone what matters most, they'll talk about their family, their health, and financial security. And yet this industry is the least trusted. And it's probably the least trusted because of people wearing they've got the Wall Street types, this very kind of doesn't have the accessibility of the ordinary person wandering around their local shopping centre. And so I think if we can bring just the accessibility factor into everyone's lives through using technology to access more people. I know there's a lot of advisors are doing podcasts now and doing their own videos for education. That's the exciting stuff that will generate trust. It will get shared on social media, create trust, and realise that these advisors aren't just there to help the really well-off people, but they're there to help the people who are just ordinary. They get retired with a couple of $100,000 and they want to make the most of it. And as an advisor, you can charge a good fee for that, just like a normal specialist would. And people will talk. My experience will be is that the advisors that do that generate a lot of referrals off the back of that business model.
Yep. I used to work with somebody who used to talk about the concept of middle-aged white men in suits. We've seen plenty of them on TV telling fibs every now and again. So it's not just for financial advisors; it's lots of different people as well. But talk to me about the idea of transparency and how being completely open and honest about from a business point of view as well as a human being point of view.
But so I think surely now we as an industry, superannuation, financial advice, insurance, we've all worked out that if we try and get too tricky, you're going to get caught out. You will get caught out. And so I think we must construct everything, the business model around the client or the member if you're in super fund world. And if you're trying to find tricky ways to generate revenue, or inevitably I just think that will be exposed at some point because transparency is so high these days and will continue to be so, more so. And then you're risking your brand. You only get one shot. One shot in terms of holding on to your trust. And if you let go of it, it's so hard to get it back.
Yeah.
And I think, if you're not prepared, if you wouldn't want to put it on the front page of a newspaper, how you're running your business model and how you're generating income, then that probably tells you something.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think we're also all human beings too. We all make mistakes. So what are your thoughts about just leaning into when you do make mistakes to be able to own them? Yeah,
I think that's what creates trust, doesn't it? You just go, yep, we've stuffed up. We're sorry. Our bad. It happened for this reason. We had a error here recently with a technology glitch, and it impacted 150 members. It was really just a system glitch. It was embarrassing. We owned it. Yeah, and I think the advisor in question, who was very good about it, really I think appreciated the fact we just owned up and went, yep, it's system stuff up. We're sorry. What else can we do? And yeah, everyone's human, right? No one's perfect. No systems are perfect. Own it, I say. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. There's no. We're certainly used to leaning into our own mistakes here at XY. We make plenty of them. Don't you worry.
Yeah. Well, you only learn through the mistakes, though, too, don't you? And I think anyone that sort of puts any organisation, advisor, super fund that puts on a facade of everything's perfect and we've got everything nailed. Intuitively, that can't be right. So I think owning what you're doing well, what you need to work on, and being open about it creates trust.
Yes, absolutely. Well said. Anne, thanks so much for joining us in this particular episode where we talked about authenticity. I look forward to chatting with you in the next episode when we start talking about reliability.
And I know you are a very reliable man, Fraser Jack, so let's do that.
Thanks.